Welcome, Rick, and thank you for joining me on the Wholesome Crypto Podcast. I really appreciate you coming on today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And I've been following you, known you from your work in Atomic Form and how you're bringing NFTs to a real life display on your wall. But there is a lot more history to you, and that's kind of what I'm more interested about for now. And then we'll slowly creep our way back into crypto. But before all of that, before about even hearing about Bitcoin, what was your life looking like? What were you doing?
Oh, geez. So yeah, I was. Thank you for that intro. Yeah, I would say since leaving academia in 2008, I finished my bachelor's and PhD. I was more of a nanotech person. I was working in like DuPont and GE and writing papers and becoming a world expert in all things carbon nanotubes. And when the 2008 crash happened, I kind of got thrown into web
Gotcha.
tech, and so I've been there since 2008, 2009. Started 5 companies or been part of 5 companies and growing them over that 13 years. And so I really, really love that space. And I would say, my sort of exposure to Bitcoin and stuff, I remember like the Bitcoin pizza guy. I remember the Mt. Gox hack. I remember all that stuff. And at first I was just like, okay, this is kind of like weird.
Normal.
Like, normal. Yeah. I didn't really think like, it was like, yeah, but how do they really make sure you can't double spend? How do you really do this? And, I would say the real person who crypto pilled me was my uncle, who back in 95 started giving me like these gold and silver bug newsletters like back in the day, which was like, do you know the dollar's not backed by anything? And do you remember like they lost the silver standard, the gold standard and all this stuff? And like, early 2000, even at MIT, I was like hoarding my own like stash of gold and silver bars, or like not gold bars. I didn't have that much money. Silver bars. And like, I had like one gold coin and I was like, inflation's going to happen.
Time to beat it.
All this stuff. So, exactly. But you know what? I had just like, a lot of the Bitcoiners have this like, I've 10x to 50x, or, some are like, I got it at 20 cents and now it's worth whatever. And I'm like, a billionaire. It was fascinating to watch, silver prices rise from like $5 to $50. And I felt like
you figured
I 10x my money and like I have all this, I figured it out. And so, a natural segue. Although again, I saw the Mt. Gox hack. I saw the Ethereum, the DAO hack. And like, as someone who grew up kind of poor and didn't have much money, like the concept of like investing my money into something that could like in an instant go away.
It's scary.
It's scary. Actually, I was part of another currency called the Liberty Dollar back in the day, which was an attempt to get a silverback currency. They didn't legally there were some concerns around this, which was, are you trying to counterfeit the dollar? So they had to make sure it was very clear, like Liberty Dollar, and they said on the dollar note is like, this note is redeemable for an ounce of silver. And they literally had an audited vault with this. And I had put about $10,000 of my money in this. Like I was like, I'm all in because I'd already made money with silver bullion. And I was like, if I could spend it and have a real currency, like I was very excited about that.
But were people accepting it?
It was a very big educational thing. Just like Bitcoin, right? Like, what is this thing, right? Like, oh, I want to pay for a coffee in Bitcoin. Like, do you want to pay me in what? Like, you want to pay me in like magic internet money, right? It's like, what? Like, my boss is like, he needs dollars. Like, I can't, like, so Bitcoin and all these things have had that same educational problem, right? And stable coins help that because it's like, you're still accepting it, but it's still in a denomination and stuff that like you don't get in trouble for. But here's the thing, and I think this is kind of why I was at like, so we had the Mt. Gox hack, we had the DAO bug /hack/whatever, and in 2007, 2008, like Liberty Dollar got raided by the feds. So there was $50 million of like silver in a vault that people like me we legally bought. We weren't defrauding people. Like we ourselves, we're not like trying to like MLM silver or anything of that nature. But like that was like my life savings.
Damn.
It's like I was a grad student to 2008, 2009, and like literally every dollar that I had like somehow saved in grad school, whatever, was like in this silver vault. And so like the feds raided it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was my life savings. Like, and it took till about 2016. I went to the courts and they actually redistributed the silver that they had confiscated. Because they realized there wasn't anything illegal, but like my money was tied up for 7 years. And
you can't touch it.
So you can't touch it. Right. So like when I saw like, Silk Road, I mean, the guy's still like, it's like, I mean, we're talking early days crypto. Like there was a lot to be afraid of. There was a lot like having lost money in what was a sure thing, like silverback currency, sure thing. And see, Bitcoin is like this, like, oh, the feds can't confiscate it, and yet we're seeing, hacks happen. We're seeing all this stuff. So I kept like just waiting. I guess it was like my risk tolerance early on was not high enough to just plunge in, right? And I had a lot of friends who were mining, like at Boulder, in the Denver area. Some friends who like literally were like mining, had to keep their windows open because their like apartment was like overheating and stuff. And this was like when Ethereum was like $7 and Bitcoin was 100, and whatever. I would say the moment though that I went from not skeptical but like just not willing to go there was a colleague of mine. I'd already been sort of successful in the startup space, already raising money and scaling teams and all this other stuff. And someone like landed me a consulting gig, which is like, hey, this company's trying to do this neat thing with like crypto tokens, and they need someone to kind of help guide them. Would you be willing to contract? And so that was when like I started like researching things like Simple Token, which of course has gone away. A lot of projects died, but like by being paid to actually learn and really go to the white papers and really understand the mechanics, that was kind of like my first like, oh shit moment. And sorry for swearing for your audience. This is the Wholesome Podcast.
It's free form. Enjoy it.
Whatever. Free form. Yes. Just leave it. And I think that's kind of where I'm advocating as of late. It's like I think there's a lot of people that research. Maybe they get some Doge, maybe they get some Bitcoin on Robinhood, but it's a lot of people like stay at the surface, right? But like actually kind of really going deep, kind of like when I was a PhD student and really researching. Like once I started to actually go down that rabbit hole, it kind of infected my thinking, right? Just kind of like my old silver bug. When my uncle sort of silver pilled me back in the day, and now I'm like all of a sudden like can't stop thinking about this. And I almost jumped into so that was mid 2007 before the major parabolic up and crash, but I didn't leave. A lot of people like left, like, oh, it's dead. Like, no, I mean, I think
that's like, when you really figure out who's in it and who's not. Like the bull markets kind of weed out all the people who just kind of are in it for the money and not really caring about the tech and what it's offering in general. So the fact that you stayed in it during the bear market when it fell down, it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's there was this test I took once about like, how to like audit your career. And it's like, one of the questions is like 5 things that, like, do you find yourself very motivated each day? Have you learned something new and novel? And one of the questions was like, do you think about your job in the shower? Like, do you think about it like when you wake up? Do you think about it in the morning? And, even in the bear market in 2018, like literally I was running a startup, now 2 small kids, one at a time. And like every waking moment that wasn't with family or at work was thinking about like, what the hell is Zcash doing? Like what? Oh, Oracle's like, what's this like? And, because like when I joined, like, so 2000, I've been building websites since 99, building websites, just basic ones. Like when HTML was like, only just like slinging some basic, hello world stuff on your own computer, serving it to the web and whatever. And, one of the people that was sort of like my mentor who became a colleague of mine early in the Web 2 era was like, why did you dedicate your life to this open source community? And he's like, I joined the web because the kid in New York City and the kid in Africa have the same access to get their voice out, to the same access to like the marketplaces, the same access to whatever. This is democratizing the world. Right. This is a tool that as we build these open source platforms like Drupal, which was the community that I was in, like this is what allows people in these other areas to like level up in the way to have same access that we have. The privileges, what we talk about these days. And frankly, we're obviously deep into the deplatforming era, and there's so much we can talk about that, but it bothers me at a fundamental level. That people who are sometimes caught in the crosshairs of an algorithm, like Facebook deletes 1 billion spam accounts a quarter.
A quarter of the year or a quarter? A year. That's crazy.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Right. And you can't do that by hand.
No.
Can't do that by hand. So, you've heard stories of people who are like, I own a plumbing shop and I posted, like, I don't even know what the hell I posted. My account just got like, people who depend on Facebooks of the world just to like post their, like, I run a Pilates studio, I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a nutrition, I'm a whatever. MailChimp has changed their terms of services. Like, you can literally lose your, like, that concept of like losing your voice on the internet. We saw it with like really terrible organizations like Stormfront. It's like, yes, there's like, this white supremacy, like there are some bad actors, but the day that I believe it's Cloudflare, no, it wasn't Cloudflare, it was the other one. That was one of them. Turned off CDN protection and basically let that site get hosed. It's It's only a matter of time before this happens to everybody. And it's arbitrary, right? If Facebook is deleting 1,000 accounts a quarter, there's going to be a lot of collateral damage of people who like depend upon this as a primary source of income or an income stream will be deplatformed for no reason. And Jack Butcher on Twitter, Visualize Value, he just posts like really beautiful like graphics that sort of highlight these sort of quotes of wisdom. Twitter has still banned that account. He got it up to like 100,000. It was like a primary source of income advertising for his services, his other things, and one day he just lost it and no recourse, right? So I would say I think the thing that's really kept me going through that bear market, which was like, no, there's too much centralization of power going on, and and while yes, network effects are always going to favor the Facebooks and whatever, we need to make sure that people who need a voice, who need access to for their job, for anything, right, to sort of have access to it. And so like from a very sort of like, I'm very much like a social like libertarian, like I want people to have access, to if our lives are going to get increasingly digital, it only makes sense that we should all still have equal access to these platforms, right? It just doesn't make sense otherwise. So I would just study the bear market and I just never let go. It was like an obsession. And finally I had kind of like a Harry Met Sally moment where it was like, I've been reading about this and staying at the surface for like, an hour a day for years. And I'm like, why am I not in it? Why am I not?
But you were learning about it, right? For that consulting job. Yep. So I guess that's when you're learning how much more you need to be in it, how much more you have to actually dedicate your time and provide value to the ecosystem. Because that's like similar to me. Like I've been watching crypto for a long time, learning about it, talking about it, but I haven't until now really been contributing back to the community, giving back to what I believe is helping the world, as you say, in a decentralized manner.
Well, and there's only so much you can learn. Knowledge and experience are different, right? You can read about something all day long, but until you're actually like touching it, experimenting, whatever, it's like you can read about NFTs and it's like, well, what is it? But until you like viscerally feel like what it is like to either buy or trade or be a part, like it's you just can't know, right? It's the same thing about reading Bitcoin. It's like until you actually do your first trade, like the first time you send thousands of dollars and it appears from one wallet to another wallet with nobody in the middle, it's like this, like if I had to send this as a wire, it's like internationally, like I had to wait till like business hours. I'd have to walk in, provide a path, provide all these types of things. And then I still have to wait 24 hours. Did it even show up? And like, there's that first moment where you're like, holy crap, I just did that and nobody could stop it. And here it shows up. And then when you try to go back to a wire, like when I moved and put a house, and I was like, I can't, it's almost like I couldn't tolerate it anymore. Like it used to be tolerable because that was just the way. But once you've experienced a better way, you're like, oh, I have to set up a wire and like time it with my banker and this. And like I literally at the last second, the day before closing, they're like, this is no joke. So I bought a house in Oklahoma and I called my bank up. I said, okay, well, we've done all the things. I have the money in the account. I need a wire tomorrow. What do you need to do? And they're like, oh, you just have to show up in person. Okay, well, you're my Colorado branch. I'm in Oklahoma now. Like,
how's that going to work?
Please let me send the wire. They're like, oh, we have to do it in person. I'm like, I don't think you understand. Like, I'm in Oklahoma. This is Colorado. And they were like, well, the nearest branch is in Dallas. And I was like, you want me to drive 3 hours just to show in person to send a wire? And I was like, I was talking to my wife. I was like, I may have to do this. Like, this house has to like,
you have no choice. It's like if your hands are behind your back, what are you going to do?
So, and I'm like, was like, if this is Bitcoin, like I send my wallet, I send it in 60 seconds, and in 10 minutes I know it's there, and like this is insane. This is absolutely insane. And the bank was like, I was like, can I just DocuSign it? Can you authority? Like, no, we don't DocuSign. I'm like, you're a bank with billions of dollars assets, and you can't even. And so it's like once you kind of like literally experience the gains and the benefits and the changes and stuff, it's really hard to go back.
Yep.
And so, yeah, so I sort of made it a commitment. I was like, you know what? I believe this to be the future. It may not be the future I think. Maybe, everything in Web3 is going to, like, some are going to fail, some are going to succeed. We don't know which parts of it are going to like last, but I know some of
course. I think the ecosystem is going to last. The whole technology is going to last. Just how we use it is up for grabs.
Right. Yeah. And so if that's true, and I know that's where the puck is going, why am I still over here? Like, why? If at some point I just said, I got to go. And I think there's a Tim Ferriss podcast with Naval and Dixon where what Tim said, like, literally, like, just hit me to my core, which he goes, I've never seen, or it's been like 10 years, I think he said, since I've seen an industry where people I know that have been in, like, Facebook and Amazon for years, if not a decade plus, happy in their job, whatever, literally, like, just stop that day, turn in their note, like, they're just leaving and like, not like, oh, I'm thinking about it, I'll do it in 3 months, whatever, but like, it's like they see the light or something and they're like, I'm gone. Like, it's just something clicks. Oh my gosh, it's here. And there's no question you're moving forward. It's like, of course, and I've done that with a couple of Web2 colleagues. Like, I know some people who were part of companies that later IPO'd, early, C and VP level people. And one of them was like, after 3 weeks ago, oh my gosh, this is exactly what it was like in the beginning of Web 2, where we had composability, we were building like the potential, whatever. He goes like, I'm all in. Like, he literally went from like, he saw my email in an email thread to like full blown, I'm crypto pilled, like I'm doing this in 3 weeks.
Wow. And it just makes sense. It's like, it's obvious like, once you're there, but it's hard to make that transition. So I respect people who do that. It's crazy.
It's tough. There's a shroud, like there's a shroud of scamming. There's a shroud of like, you have to be willing to kind of go through what are obviously problems. And, there's a lot of people who are like, well, I don't want to become like those like anonymous Bitcoin maxis on Twitter who are just like there's an aversion, right? Like that I think a lot of people feel based on their perception, and that sort of holds them back. And also the fear, like the DAO hack, the Silk Road, all these things.
It's new. It's scary. It's like, you have to learn through it. And like, I don't know anyone who's been in crypto that hasn't been burned somehow. Thankfully, not like losing all their funds, but like, I've lost money on crypto. It just happens. It's how you learn. That's what I want to do more, is like to teach people and protect them. Like, it is a weird industry. It's like, not everything does make sense, but once it does make sense to you, it's very clear the path you have to go and what great opportunities are coming up with this industry.
Yeah, it's tough though. Like, once you've crossed that chasm, it's like you can't go back to remember what you're thinking before. Like, you want to bring other people over, like, you can't see what I see, but if I could just teleport my brain, like my mind over to you, maybe you can, it's very much like a huge activation barrier that once you get over, it's like you can't remember what it was like to not almost.
Yeah, man, I don't remember what life was like without the internet. I don't. Like, without Google Maps and Apple Maps, like I don't. How do we drive anywhere? It's crazy. Like, I remember my parents using the maps, like a physical map, or using MapQuest back in the day. But now it's just like, we've come so used to this technology. Now that's something that has to happen for the crypto industry. Yeah, there's a certain feeling of inevitability. Like, once you cross a chasm, like, NFTs are out there now. Like, they're there. DeFi is out there now. Privacy coins are out there now. And it's like, you just can't go back. I mean, maybe they don't like sort of like take mainstream. That's for sure. I mean, that's the whole, crossing the chasm from the early adopters to the early majority. Like, there's still, I mean, and there's some good criticism out there. Like the former CEO of Signal, who just stepped down, like wrote that great, a little bit of a scathing article, but like a really well thought. Like, look, Web3 still has these big UX problems, and still, like, that will be required to get mass adoption. For sure.
And I think those are a lot. I think the industry actually absorbed those criticisms really well and see these as, well, this is just the next thing we got to work on to get to that sort of retail end user adoption, that these just become ubiquitous. Like, you stop thinking of it like Web3, just think of it as the web.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like the web got bigger, and like this is now just part of. You can't think of a world before that. And like right now, we're still seeing the new world, and it's still new and novel. I think at some point it'll just be like, oh, it's the way it always was. Like Facebook. It's hard to remember the days before Facebook, but now it's just there. Like, you just know it's
exactly. You're right, because I also read that article from Moxie. And it feels like there is so much more to grow and learn and advance in the industry. Like there's a lot of work to be done. No, this is not perfect. It's not amazing. I mean, obviously, Ethereum has its own problems, especially managing gas fees. Mm-hmm. It's not affordable for people to just use that as a daily transaction. There's a lot more work that has to be done. That's thanks to layer 2 and et cetera. But we're learning, and I think people are so quick to say, "Oh, it's not figured out yet, so screw this." It's no, like we're figuring it out, and we're seeing the future, and we're working towards it. We want as many people as possible to help build it together.
Absolutely, and having grown up, so I'm 40 now, and like I had sort of the analog childhood where you say back to maps is like I remember having to like meet friends without having a phone to it was just a different world, right? And like now we can't I can't go anywhere without my Google Maps. Like it's just like I remember that world, but I can't like really remember that world. It's like it's a different place. And like people like forget like YouTube was only from like 2005, and like before that like you had to upload raw videos and figure out code. I mean, it was video is just everywhere now. Like we just take it for granted. It's just like ubiquitous, and all these programs to upload and all this stuff. So I think all the challenges. I mean, email used to be something that only the geeks use, and now like you can't think of a person who doesn't have an email, even a 70-year-old grandma. And so it just takes time, right? It just takes time to solve the answer space. And Antonio, those guys talk through. It's like, look, every major industry has gone through these challenges, and every industry eventually gets to the point where they can make it ubiquitous if there's enough value to be given to the end users who are willing to go along that journey.
Yeah, and with crypto, it's such a disruptive industry too, and it has its hands. It could have its hands in any industry. It depends on the application you use, but it's a tool. It's a tool for the web, and everything uses the web now, so everything can use a blockchain. But that's that. So you're getting into it. You've started a few companies before. You're I guess an entrepreneur. So that's kind of like your background, a serial entrepreneur. Where is this crypto information that you're like working on and seeing the light? Where is this guiding you? Where do you see your efforts being put into?
It's a great question. I will say like I would say sort of full-time in crypto now since August. So it's not been a long period of time. I've been studying it. I would say there's several areas that I'm very passionate about. Like I love a lot of the ZK technology. Like how do you add, how do you make a public ledger private? Like that just blows my mind. And like just that when I first really understood what Zcash was doing, I was like, oh my gosh, you not only have this decentralized public permissionless ledger, but you added privacy and like this sort of voodoo magic that makes it work. And it's like, it just solves so many awesome problems. Oracles are fascinating too. Like, in order for blockchain to sort of like continue to I would say now kind of infect the world, it has to be able to touch the real world, right? And right now, on-chain data is like when DeFi, right? It's like the data has to be on-chain, or it has to have some way to like reference data off-chain. And I think as more and more real-world events get sort of tied to crypto, we can't store it all in the blockchain or whatever. So like Oracle is like that sort of nice middleware between data that exists off the chain and sort of smart contracts on the chain. I don't know how far or how big that market's going to be, but it just feels like there's like, that'll be one of those like unlocks where it's like more stuff can be done. And especially once the layer 2 stuff in Ethereum gets more robust because like right now it's so expensive to even work on the layer 1s. Like, so to bring in more data and do more stuff, it's like, it's just cost prohibitive. But as these L1s and sort of L2s come in, I think the cost dropping will offer sort of new opportunities there. I think NFTs as a as not a piece of art, but as a primitive are fascinating. One of my early companies was working on this concept of like, so my co-founder then was an archaeologist, and the concept was like, okay, our minds no longer store memories anymore. We store indexes to memories. We don't remember all the pictures. We remember where all the pictures are. We don't remember phone numbers. We remember what the phone numbers are. We don't remember all the facts about a book. We remember where to find it in a book. Like we've replaced our
exactly. I think Einstein actually said, I'm quoting Einstein, but I don't know if he actually said this. But anyways, he's like, you don't have to remember anything the only thing you have to remember is where the library is.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So the smartest people in software development, like they literally like, I'm just really good at using Stack Overflow. Like I know like some stuff, but like I know where to look up all the stuff. Right. And I had the unfortunate experience of 2007, I think it was. I don't know, 2016. I bought a new MacBook and I had a backup and I transferred all my data. And I was still using like a mail app at that time versus like just purely in the cloud with Gmail. And for some reason, Apple still like hides their library folder. So like I was going like folder by folder and like transferring over and just verifying things were there. And then I just erased the laptop, sold it, and never checked my backup. And it turns out I lost every email I'd ever received from 98 to 2012.
Wow.
And you might say like, oh, whatever, right? Just email.
What was on it, yeah.
But there was whole friendships and people I knew and like, you know, back in college and threads that, I had, my mind is indexes. It doesn't remember all the data anymore, right? We have to manage more data. So like, it was this like, oh shit moment where it's like, I literally lost part of my identity.
Wow. You can't find it again.
It's like there's this memory optimizer course by Vera Birkenbiel from Learning Strategies, which says like, one of the things that happens with Alzheimer's is people remember general memories. Like you might remember this person's your son or this person's your whatever, or you live in this area, but the individual memories go away. And like that email archive represented a lot of individual memories, everything from track and field, like, email lists that were going on, friendships at fraternities, department level, material science ones, my advisor, like all that richness of like some of the details and conversations that I had with the interaction with these people is now gone. And those individual memories are now like in my, like, I never planned on memorizing all in my brain. I just knew where they were and now they're all gone. Right. So what the frick does this have to do with what we're talking about? Right. Around 2010, I gave up trying to keep a centralized photo gallery. Like, I used to try to get all of my iPhoto, like some of it was on Facebook, some of it was on Instagram, some of it whatever. And I know for a fact that, AOL Instant Messenger went away and MySpace is kind of puddling along, but it'll eventually go away. And then like at some point, everything that on the web that we haven't indexed to will go away.
Yeah, people think Google and Facebook and Apple will last forever, but we don't know that.
Right. No. And I'm 40 and I'm planning on being around until I'm 80 or 90. Like when I'm 80, am I going to log into Facebook.com to go scroll back to pictures I posted?
It's meta now, right?
Right, it's meta now. Whatever, it is, right? But those indexes are going away. So like, I think about it like, so my friend Peter and I, his company now like does things that powers like the Dave Matthews Band, the Bob Dylan Archive, a bunch of like large libraries, right? Because as an archaeologist, he's like, well, how do I make sure this media persists over time? Bob Dylan has this massive collection of media that is there, but how is that still going to be playable, searchable, indexable in 2080? How is that like data going to persist? And not just for famous people, but like when I'm 80, when I look back at my life, like how am I going to find all my media? How am I going to find this sort of digital identity? Like, would I care? Maybe not, but I probably care about a lot of it. So like, how do we think about things over time? And I think NFTs are this beautiful thing. Granted, they're public, and now we have to think about there's private NFTs or whatever. But how do we think of like data persistence over time? How do we think about like our digital identity constantly being churned? Like I have photos in an analog scrapbook at home or my mom's home that has pictures down to I'm 1 year old, right? What's going to happen if my whole digital identity is deletable at any moment? Like I've stored in other platforms or like a failed upgrade for failed backup. I don't want to lose pictures of my 1-year-old daughter and my 7-year-old daughter. Like, those are important to me. And I think, so like long-term archival storage, like things like IPFS and like, how do you pay for storage that'll persist forever, that you may have only encrypted access to, but persists beyond maybe like, a fire happening and, cloud backup going away and all this stuff. So there's so many areas I think that Web3 could solve in a way that doesn't have a business model in Web2.
Yeah.
And so I think that I'm interested in a lot of spaces. So I'm working with Atomic Forum, which is really trying to address the NFT market, which is, there's this, it's only been a year since NFTs like really blew the hell up. Like it went from like, yeah, NFTs are going to be big to like,
oh yeah, it's $1 million NFT, but who knows about those prices? But yeah, like the mainstream definitely caught a lot of attention towards NFTs.
Right. I mean, maybe 18 months. Like there's a trickle. Like there's some things here. Yeah, the punk's already there. Blah blah blah. But like, who's going to buy it? Who's going to care? Mainstream users will never do this, right? Whatever. And all of a sudden, like Adidas and all Nike and all these, and it's not. Now it's like, okay, this data now exists. What do you do with it? Like, what do you do with it beyond, like, cool, it's in a wallet and whatever? And I think we're just like, every time there's sort of like an explosion of one part in technology, there's sort of this new opportunity to say, okay, what do we do with that? Like, so like we've just sort of crossed this chasm of NFTs being like this like novelty that only some rich Ethereum people who are really crypto native will use, to like consumers both interested in and buying and trading and whatever. And as the layer fees and stuff go down, like this will become just as normal as having an iPhoto library, right? It's like, oh, of course, here's my photos that I took from my camera, and here's my NFTs that I collect from whatever, right? So building experiences on top of that as sort of your digital identity across multiple chains, multiple wallets, is really what we're thinking about at Atomic. And so like I'm really, and I love NFTs as a primitive, because like, NFTs are also ENS domains. Yep. And NFTs will eventually be like fractional ownership in real estate or whatever. Like it just so happened that images were the cute things that kind of got people excited and made it like a mainstream thing, right? But it's not going away, and it's going to be very much, now that people know, and the tooling made the images and videos fast and accessible and wide. I think there's going to be more innovation on top of that to say, oh, well, what if we do this? Now that we know that everyone can and will buy and trade and do and all this other stuff, let's start adding different flavors of these primitives. And that's going to be fascinating.
And then, so how is Atomic Forum, what are they building in order to help with the situation, and how do they see the future of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, I think one of the things that Atomic did really well, Atomic Forum really did well, is the founders were already really plugged in with the artist community. They weren't just like people who just saw like, ooh, NFTs, what do we do with this? They already had, they were already crypto natives all the way back from the start of Ethereum. In fact, Garrett, even prior in Bitcoin, and I think he even wrote one of the first Bitcoin ETF proposals, like way back in the day. Like, so very early in on the space. So he was really watching the space for a long time, and he's New York City, part of the art scene, him and Isabel, and it's there was a bit of validation needed in the beginning, right? It was like, okay, people were buying punks and stuff for all this money, and even Bored Ape Yacht Club, but like, how do we mainstream this? Like, when do we get legitimacy, right? And the displays were an amazing bridge between what we call normies or non-crypto native people in real life, kind of like actually seeing them, and like it became real. This unreal thing became more real. And things like Sotheby's and working with art galleries and key things, they were able to sort of pair with some of these up and coming or even famous artists that transitioned into NFTs Web3, really provide sort of this amazing experience of them with these shows and auction houses. And I would say that they were really part of that legitimization of NFTs as like, yes, broader, like, the Beeple moment was huge, right? That was like that
was exactly, mainstream starts getting attention on it.
Yes. And so, Gary Vee and all these different people, I think, added to that collective legitimization of NFTs as a widespread consumer thing. And so the history of Atomic so far has been largely in that display. So there's like both the 4K displays that can query the chain, and you can sort of connect your wallet and drag your particular NFTs and start to like display them. I have a 4K frame right here.
That's cool.
And it's beautiful. Like I use my parallel alpha cards, and like it's honestly a different experience. It's one thing to scroll OpenSea and be like, okay. Yeah. It's another thing to like see it in like a beautiful mat and like with the border and the name and like just really sharp. And it's like, wow, it's like just a different way of interacting. And I think this is just the beginning for Atomic, both sort of on web, in metaverse, VR, as well as hardware display. We're trying to like help make that bridge from NFT is just something you collect and store in a wallet, like your wallet, and just see on a 2D gallery and on an OpenSea screen, to those richer experiences that say, okay, now that everyone's touching and using these, like what can we do with them? Like what is the really neat stuff that we can do here? And so
we're totally like imagining, like I can totally see like you're saying VR, where you put your headset on and then you walk into an NFT gallery just like you would walk into a physical gallery where you see artwork. Yep. You just walk in and people would just bid on them, like auction them off just like that.
Yep.
And that's going to happen. I think it's already happening. People are building on this. So
yeah, you pull up your VR wallet. Like you literally like open my Ethereum wallet and you like trade a card with someone and they pick the card out. I was like, okay, cool, into my wallet. And like it's like there's just these experiences that like we're just getting started on,
and we're testing things out. This is all like a learning experience.
Yeah. And given I have kind of a broader Web 2 startup experience, so like sort of entrepreneurial, I can take lessons that we sort of in patterns we've seen in other industries, like look, the iOS versus Android debate. iOS went for consistency. They have guidelines. They have like if it works on iPhone, like if you build an app, in the last couple of years building apps and on Android and iOS, but like if your app works on iPhone 6S, it's going to work on 8, it's going to work on 10. It's pretty much, with some screen resolution differences, there's an incredibly strong consistency, and Apple like both restricts the types of apps that can be done, and they have very strict human interface guidelines. Like, so it's like an app is going to work across all of them. And then Android took like the do anything, like mostly like in fragmentation, et cetera. What's the point? The point is right now the crypto space is incredibly fragmented. Yes, Ethereum is like maybe the cultural center of like say the NFT space, but people got priced out with gas fees and they're out in Solana. Solana's huge now. It's like 20% of all NFTs is now in Solana, and there's like Tezos from the historical ones, and there's Avalanche, and there's Phantom, and there's This is great for each chain, but back to my point of like I don't have a consolidated iPhone library anymore. Like, is a great user experience that I have to go to all the different places to see all this stuff, right? There's going to be a need to sort of consolidate this, and sort of like the end user at the end of the day is will care about the tech to a point, but really cares about my stuff. Like, where's my stuff? And I think like you can see that discomfort too in streaming services, right? People hate the fact that I have 9 subscriptions. Like I want to watch the show.
You might as well get cable again. It's like
exactly. But what did Roku do? Roku made it so you can install all of their different stations on one app, on one physical device with a so it's a hardware software solution. But it made a global search. So like my 7-year-old, when she's like, I want to watch this movie, I don't have to go into 9 different apps. I search for, when the Christmas is out, the Grinch. I just search for the Grinch and it says, oh, Grinch is on Netflix now. Cool, because, at some point Netflix will lose their license and it'll pop up on Amazon Prime, or it's not on Amazon Prime, it's going to pop up here. And the 7-year-old doesn't give a crap
where it is
that this one was minted on Ethereum. They just want to know where the thing is.
They want it. Yeah, it's true.
And so every chain wants everyone to live on their chain, and that's very good for the chain. So so I guess the problem that one of the problem spaces that we're trying to solve is like there's a lack of good middleware to query this data, and there's also a lack of robust solutions to consolidate this data in order to create really amazing. So there's both what do we do with these experiences? What do we do with these NFTs to make great experiences? And how do we also like get them? How do we get all this stuff? So that's about as much as I could talk about it. But there's just So like we're sort of in that beautiful space of like, okay, there's this explosion of things happening. What's the next opportunity?
I'm excited for that to grow, and I'm keeping my watch on Atomic Form. But before you go, one of the last questions I wanted to ask you was, what is your favorite wholesome crypto moment? Something that really made you feel good in the environment.
I think that, Crypto Cobain, although he's rebranded himself to Kobe, he was doing those great. I mean, I think just in general, like that help of artists.
Gotcha.
There's that whole archetype of the starving artist. Actually, no. I mean, here's one. There was an artist in India, who, was trying to sell some of his NFTs for like 0.04 ETH. It was like $100. And I just saw OpenSea like tweet one of his things. Like, I was like, hey, share your stuff. He got retweeted. I was like, hey, you're in this sort of metaphysical space. Kind of like it. Kind of vibe with it. So it's like, what? No worries. Sounds great. And you would have thought like I just like gave him $1 million. Like, he was just so thrilled. Like he DM'd me, we're chatting it up, and I said, you know what else you got? And he had this really beautiful but haunting image. It was called The Last Swim. And it was imagine the ocean, but it was like this like kind of sad yellow, like kind of like orange, like a sunset, like and it was like these turtles sort of swimming in it, and it said like, imagine the sea not being able to like heal itself. There's just so much toxicity in it that like, at some point there will be like the last swim, the last time these old turtles or whatever. And I just got like tingles, and I was like, here we are flipping JPEGs for thousands of, there's all this cash like zipping around, NFTs. And one of the companies I helped mentor back in 2019 in the crypto space is called Region Network. It works with like using blockchain as an arbitrage opportunity to like help landowners get funded for doing renewable and regenerative agricultural practices. Like if we can think about oracles, like if I can prove to you that I'm sequestering carbon and doing like overcropping and stuff, would you fund this essentially to like for me to do better practices that help the environment? So it's a way to like attach or arbitrage like people on the funding side with farmers who want to do things and landowners that want to do things on the regenerative side. So anyway, long story short, I just had an idea. I was like, I bought the NFT, and I was like, I bought it as a reminder of myself. I was like, at the end of the day, crypto has to be done to mean something. It has to be done like
exactly.
If we're just going to make a bunch of money and like while the world burns down, what are we doing? And so like I bought it, and then like 20 minutes later, I'm like, this really doesn't sit well with me. I don't need this to like that. If it's a reminder for me, that's still not enough. Like I want to help. So I immediately jacked the bid up on that piece. I put it up for 1 ETH, and I said, okay, I'm fundraising. I want to sell this for 1 ETH, and I'll put 50% to the artist and 50% to an ocean,
nice.
A nonprofit that's helping the ocean, right? And I pinged the co-founder of, one of the co-founders of Region, Gregory. I said, please retweet this to anyone you know. I'm looking to raise money for what you believe in, what I believe in, regenerative practices and so forth. Within 30 minutes, someone in his network was like, I'll do it. Threw an ETH into it, and like literally 10 minutes later, I'm like forwarded half an ETH to someone who's trying to sell a piece for 0.04, like literally the day before.
A huge increase. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah. So like at the time, ETH was like $4,000. So like this artist from India who was like thrilled to sell a piece for $100 sees $2,000 pop into his account, and just immediately pings me back as like, I'm literally dancing. My parents don't believe this. And I'm just like, this has like changed my life. And I'm like, it was just me and some dudes on the internet, like just like thinking like, oh, wouldn't this be cool if I could take this haunting image that touched me and actually make it do something? And, to actually pay so I took half of the ETH and I matched it. So we sent $4,000 to this ocean nonprofit. And that's $4,000 that sort of came out of nowhere. So like an up and coming artist now has enough funds to keep going. And a nonprofit just got a $4,000 windfall just because some dudes on Twitter saw some things and did some things. And that was like, that's pretty cool.
It's amazing. And that's what the community is all about, is like really helping each other grow and like find their true potentials and giving back. I feel like there's so much talk on trading and how much money someone's made, but I love when I hear stories of how people are giving back and are trying to mostly give back.
Well, even this background is like, this crazy. I don't know if there's a podcast will say it out or if it's video versus audio, but like there's a colleague of mine from the Drupal space called Circuitry, Sirkitre. He's been doing VR for 5 years, and he's been just making, like, before crypto, he's making these like VR worlds and then making like 2D images and audio with it. And the guy's just brilliant and talented as all heck. And, just like everyone, he posted some things on OpenSea and got no bids, no bites. And like, I saw his stuff. I'm like, dude, I love Fragmented. I love mandalas, like whatever. And like, buying it like, we've been colleagues forever, but like, there was like a special moment the first day I bought, like, I was like, man, I own an original circuitry. Like, I own an original copy of your stuff. And like, he's like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like, and it was $100. It wasn't like it cost me, an arm and a leg. And $100 for a lot of people is a lot of money. So I don't want to downplay the money, but like,
it's not a CryptoPunk.
It can give people
multi-million-dollar trade. It's like a fair exchange.
It's a fair exchange, but it's also like a vote of confidence. It's an interaction and experience that I never would have had with him, or he would never have had with other people that have since bought his stuff. And having if I sort of bring this full circle, and I know we'll wrap up, is like, I was a student of crypto before I became a user of crypto. And as a student, you could read something like that, but not really quite get it. You don't feel it until you do something. And when I actually started doing some of it, I felt it. And I think a lot of people who are negative on, whether NFTs or DeFi or whatever, there's something different when you actually experience the result and you're like, oh, even if someone told me that, I probably wouldn't believe them, or I didn't think about that. And so like to actually go through some of these like experiences with colleagues or like, up and coming artists or, nonprofits, like it gives me hope that, while there's a lot of speculation, a lot of scammers, a lot of stuff, and that will continue to persist, in the Wild West that we are in, I think more and more people, I hope, will take some of these windfalls and really sort of drive it towards paying it forward and bring more people into this ecosystem and do great things. So that's why
I love that. Yeah, I love seeing that. I'm glad you're a part of that and helping out with the community. Thank you so much, Rick, for joining me. I hope the best for you, best for Atomic Form. I'm excited to keep following you, watching you grow, and best to you.
Thank you so much.
See you, everyone.
Bye.